Some debts are paid in gold, some are paid in blood, and some are paid in a darkness so complete you forget what light tasted like. This tomb was opened by a team of British archaeologists in 1894. Standard Middle Kingdom burial, gold funerary mask, canopic jars, cedar coffin, everything where it should be. But in the servants' corridor, underneath the main chamber, they found something that didn't belong. A full adult skeleton, laid out on bare stone. No coffin, no wrappings, no name carved anywhere. Just bones. A row of small, carved servant figures lined up around him, and a thick residue of old wax sealed over the jaw. The excavation report listed it as anomalous secondary burial, possibly a servant interred alive as part of an archaic ritual. They photographed the corridor, cataloged the bones, and moved on. Footnote in somebody else's dig report. They got it half right. He was interred alive, but he wasn't a servant. He was the second most powerful man in Egypt. And this is the story of how he ended up in that hole. My name is the Karmic Debt Collector, and the ledger is open. Upper Egypt. Roughly 1850 BCE, give or take a decade. The Middle Kingdom, 12th Dynasty. A period most people skip right past when they think about ancient Egypt. No pyramids going up, no dramatic foreign invasions, just a long stretch of competent government, reliable harvests, and a bureaucracy so efficient it makes modern tax agencies look like lemonade stands. The royal capital sits at Ichtawi, near the Fayum, and on the throne is a pharaoh named Senusret. He's old. Not ancient, maybe late 50s, but in a world where most men are lucky to see 45, he's operating on borrowed time, and he knows it. He built his reign on patience, not spectacle. Never fought a war he didn't have to. Never built a monument bigger than the one before it just to prove a point. Measured. Deliberate. The kind of ruler whose name doesn't end up in adventure movies because he was too busy actually governing. And standing one step behind him, every single day for 22 years, is his vizier, Khety. If you don't know what a vizier was in ancient Egypt, think of it as prime minister, chief justice, and head of the IRS rolled into one miserable job. The vizier ran everything. Grain stores, taxation, land disputes, foreign correspondence, infrastructure, judicial appeals. If it kept Egypt functioning, it crossed the vizier's desk. Khety came from nothing special. Minor scribe's family, middle of nowhere in Upper Egypt. Rose through the ranks on pure ability. By the time Senusret appointed him vizier, he'd already been managing half the government's workload unofficially. And for 22 years, he did the job better than anyone had a right to expect. Here's the thing about Khety, though. And I want you to sit with this, because it matters for everything that comes after. He wasn't wrong. Not about the work. He genuinely did run Egypt. He settled the disputes. He balanced the grain reserves. He managed the governors who would have happily gouged each other over canal rights if left unsupervised. Senusret set the direction, but Khety built the road. The problem wasn't competence. The problem was what 22 years of competence did to the man holding the pen. Picture this. A receiving hall in the palace. Two provincial governors are in front of Khety, arguing about irrigation rights along a secondary canal. Khety listens for about 4 minutes, then cuts them both off and issues a ruling. Calm, precise, final. The governors don't argue. They bow. Not to the Pharaoh's seal Khety carries, but to Khety himself. You could see it in their posture. They'd learned whose word actually moved dirt and water in this country. Senusret arrives late, carried on a litter. He looks gaunt, tired. He glances at Khety's decision, waves his approval without reading the details, and is carried out again. Khety watches him go, and there's this expression on his face. Not quite contempt. More like a carpenter watching someone else accept a commission for a house he built with his own hands. And then there was the heir problem. Senuseret had fathered 3 sons. The eldest died in a quarry collapse during a construction project. Scaffolding failure, rock slide, and the crown prince was just gone. The second son survived to his 20s before a fever took him in 3 days, which left Nefer-Hotep. Nefer-Hotep was 16, thin, quiet, with a habit of spending his evenings in the temple archive reading old star charts and religious texts instead of attending military reviews. At one such review, a chariot demonstration for visiting dignitaries, the boy looked physically ill watching the horses run. The court noticed. The court always notices weakness, especially in the young. Khety watched all of this and said nothing publicly. But in private, to his personal scribe Baufra, a man who'd been his right hand for 15 years, he laid it out plain. When Senuseret dies, Egypt will be governed by a boy who can't look a horse in the eye, and every governor south of Memphis will test him before the embalming fluid is dry. Baufra agreed. And then there was silence between them, which is where the worst decisions tend to germinate. Now here's what nobody in that court understood about Nefer-Hotep, because nobody was paying close enough attention. The boy watched people. Not the stars, not the texts. Those were the excuse. He watched people the way his father did. Quiet, patient, cataloging. But we'll come back to that. Because Khety had already decided the pharaoh needed to die. The court physician was an old man named Nebamun, competent, careful, trusted by Senuseret for 2 decades. He was also in debt. Not the financial kind, the political kind. His son held an administrative posting in the Fayum that Khety had arranged 5 years earlier. His nephew served as a scribe in the vizier's personal office. Nebamun's entire family tree was rooted in Khety's soil, and both men knew it. Khety didn't threaten. He didn't need to. He invited Nebamun to his quarters one evening, poured him wine, and described a future. Senuseret was declining. Everyone could see it. The trembling hands, the fatigue. When the pharaoh died and Nefer-Hotep took the throne, there would be changes. New appointments, new loyalties. Nebamun's son in the Fayum, well, a boy pharaoh's new advisors might want their own people in those posts. Unless, of course, the transition was managed by someone who valued continuity. Someone who remembered his friends. Nebamun understood. He didn't say yes that night. He went home, sat in his courtyard until the oil lamp burned down, and came back the next morning. That's how it always works. The ones who say yes immediately are unreliable. It's the ones who lose a night of sleep first that you can count on. They've already made peace with what they're doing. The method was simple. Nebamun prepared a tincture from crushed copper ore and orpiment, arsenic essentially, though they didn't call it that. Mixed in trace amounts with the herbal remedies he was already administering for Senuseret's genuine joint pain. The pharaoh was taking medicine every day. Now that medicine was killing him a little more each time. The brilliance of it, and I use that word with disgust, was that the symptoms mimicked exactly what you'd expect from an aging man. Increasing fatigue, confusion, yellowing skin, the liver failing, the body winding down. No one questioned it because it looked like what it was supposed to look like, an old king getting older. Senuseret trusted Nebamun completely. He'd take his medicine each morning, wince at the bitter taste, and joked that the physician was trying to kill him with foul remedies. Nebamun would smile. Every single time he'd smile. There's a cruelty in that smile that I can't get past. The joke landing on both sides of the truth, and only one man knowing it. Khety, meanwhile, kept his distance from the actual poisoning. Smart. He never touched the medicine, never visited the physician's preparation room, never put himself in a position where his hands were dirty in any literal sense. He simply continued being the loyal vizier, overworked, devoted, increasingly shouldering more of the pharaoh's duties as the old man weakened. The court saw a man stepping up. They should have seen a man stepping over. And his plan for after? It wasn't a crown grab. Khety was smarter than that. A commoner seizing the throne would have united every faction in Egypt against him within a month. No. He'd serve as regent for Neferhotep, citing the boy's youth. Rule through him. Arrange a marriage alliance with a powerful Theban family that owed Khety personally. Gradually reduce the prince to a ceremonial figure. A living statue on a golden chair while Khety ran the country officially, instead of just unofficially. He wasn't grabbing power. He was building a cage. And from inside that cage, he'd keep doing the same job he'd done for 22 years, just without the inconvenience of asking permission. He actually slept badly over it. He'd pace his quarters at night, running the justification through his teeth. Senuseret was fading anyway. Neferhotep would destroy everything. The southern border would buckle. The Sinai copper would stop. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for Egypt. That right there, that is the most dangerous sentence a powerful man can say to himself in the dark. While Khety paced and justified, Neferhotep sat in the temple archive by lamplight. But he wasn't reading star charts. Not tonight. Tonight he was going through administrative records, grain shipment logs, tax receipts, correspondence between Khety and the provincial governors. He'd been doing this for months, quietly, telling no one, and he'd found something. Copper shipments from the Sinai were being routed through a secondary storehouse that didn't appear in the official palace ledgers. The storehouse was controlled by Baufra, Khety's man. Neferhotep didn't confront anyone. He copied the relevant numbers onto a scrap of papyrus, rolled it inside a star chart, and put it back on the shelf. Then he went to bed. The boy everyone called weak had been building a file. He didn't know about the poison, not yet. He just knew the numbers were wrong, and he knew whose handwriting was on the wrong side of them. Meanwhile, Senuseret was getting worse. He collapsed during a ceremony at the Temple of Amun, in front of the full court. Khety caught him, held him up, kept the moment from becoming a total spectacle. The high priest, Wennefer, an old man, deliberate, owed his position to Senuseret, watched from the sanctuary with an expression like someone reading a contract they didn't like. That night, Senuseret summoned Khety. Private audience. He told Khety that if he died, Khety must protect Neferhotep. He's not the son I would have chosen for Egypt, but he's the son the gods left me. Khety promised. It was convincing. It was sincere even in some compartmentalized corner of his mind, where he'd stored the version of himself that still believed he was doing the right thing. Senuseret accepted the promise and dismissed him. There was no secret plan, no hidden letter, no trap being laid. An old man trusted his vizier, and his vizier was killing him, and that's the whole ugly shape of it. Sometimes the victim doesn't get to be clever. Sometimes they just die, and the people left behind have to figure out the rest. Senuseret died on a cool night in late autumn, went to sleep, and didn't wake up. Nebamun pronounced it liver failure, natural causes. The court grieved. Khety grieved too, and the strange thing is, some of it was real, He'd spent 22 years beside this man. You can kill someone and still mourn them. Humans are built for exactly that kind of contradiction. He moved fast. Within 3 days, he'd named himself regent for Neferhotep, citing the boy's youth and inexperience. Neferhotep stood silent during the announcement, eyes on the floor. The court read exactly what it expected: a frightened child, paralyzed by grief. Confirmation that Khety was the steady hand Egypt needed. The 70-day embalming period began, and this, right here, is where Khety's careful plan started to rot from the inside. If you know anything about Egyptian mummification, you know they remove the organs: liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, pulled out, washed, treated with natron salt, and stored in canopic jars. It was sacred work, overseen by priests, and in the case of a pharaoh, the high priest handled it personally. Wennefer had been embalming the dead for over 40 years. He'd prepared priests, nobles, 2 members of the royal family. He knew what a healthy liver looked like. He knew what a diseased liver looked like. And he knew what a poisoned liver looked like. Because 20 years earlier, he'd prepared the body of a provincial governor whose wife had been feeding him ground orpiment for 6 months. The discoloration was distinctive, a mottled green-black staining through the tissue, concentrated in ways that disease alone doesn't produce. When Wennefer cut open Senuseret's abdomen and lifted out the liver, he stopped, held it under the lamp, turned it over, and then he set it down very carefully, sent his assistants out of the chamber, and sat alone with the dead pharaoh for a long time. He didn't go to Khety. He didn't go to the court. He went to the one person everyone else had written off. He went to Neferhotep. Picture this meeting. A dark inner sanctuary of the temple, late at night. A 16-year-old boy who everyone thinks is soft. And a 70-year-old priest holding a linen-wrapped piece of his father's liver, telling him plainly, "Your father was murdered. This organ was poisoned. The staining is unmistakable. Someone with access to his daily medicine did this over a period of months." And Neferhotep, the boy who flinched at horses, didn't cry, didn't shout. He asked one question: who prepares the pharaoh's medicine? Wennefer told him, Nebamun, the court physician. Neferhotep was quiet for a while. Then he said, Nebamun's son works in the Fayum. Khety arranged the posting. Wennefer stared at him. That wasn't the response of a boy playing with star charts. That was a mind that had already been mapping the connections, months before it had a reason to. Neferhotep told the priest about the copper records, the hidden storehouse, Balfra's handwriting on the wrong ledgers. He laid it out calmly, the way you'd present a case to a judge. And Wennefer understood. This wasn't just a poisoning. This was a system. They agreed on 3 things that night. First, tell no one. Khety had allies everywhere. Governors, military commanders, half the senior bureaucracy owed him something. A premature accusation would split the court and might get them both killed. Second, the liver tissue would be preserved separately and hidden among the canopic preparations. Physical evidence, kept where only Wennefer could access it. Third, they needed Nebamun, and they needed him alive and talking. Neferhotep said he'd handle Nebamun. Wennefer looked at him like he was seeing the boy for the first time, which, in a way, he was. Over the next 5 weeks, while Khety ran his regency and rearranged the government to suit himself, Neferhotep moved like smoke. He kept playing the puppet, attended the ceremonies, sat where he was told, spoke when spoken to. But at night, he worked. He got to Balfra first. Quiet meeting in the temple. Showed him the financial records, the skimmed copper, the hidden storehouse, told him, very simply, "I know about the money. I don't yet know everything about the rest. But when this falls apart, and it will, you can either be the man who helped expose a killer or the man who helped hide one." Balfra asked for 2 days. He came back in 1. Self-preservation is a fast decision when the math is clear enough. Nebamun was harder. The physician knew that admitting to poisoning a pharaoh meant death. There was no scenario where he walked free. But Neferhotep didn't offer him freedom. He offered him a choice: confess voluntarily and die with his name intact, his family untouched, his sons keeping their posts. Or be exposed by the evidence, tried publicly, and watch his entire family line erased from every monument and record in Egypt. In Egyptian terms, that wasn't just punishment, it was annihilation across eternity. Nebamun chose his family, wrote his confession on papyrus, sealed it, and handed it over with shaking hands. A 16-year-old boy assembling a case that would bring down the most powerful official in Egypt, using leverage, patience, and the one advantage nobody thought he had: time. Because everyone was so busy watching Khety that no one was watching Neferhotep. And that's exactly how he wanted it. Winifred called a gathering of the senior court. Governors, military commanders, chief judges, everyone who mattered. Khety was there, relaxed, confident. He'd spent the last 5 weeks consolidating. Everything was in place. The regency was functioning. Neferhotep was behaving. What could go wrong? Winifred stood and announced that during the sacred preparation of Senuseret's body, he had discovered evidence that the pharaoh's death was not natural. He presented the preserved liver tissue to the court and explained the staining, what it meant, what caused it, how he had seen the same markings 20 years prior in a confirmed poisoning case. The court went very quiet. Khety's expression didn't change. Not yet. This was still manageable. An old priest making a medical claim, it could be disputed, discredited. Then Neferhotep stood. The room shifted. The boy never spoke at council. When he did, it was procedural nothings. But now he was standing, and there was something in his posture that several of the older officials would later say reminded them of his father. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He presented Nebamun's written confession. In the physician's own hand, verified by 3 scribes. The compound, the dosage, the method of concealment within the daily medicine, and the name of the man who ordered it. Then he laid out the copper shipment records, the skimmed revenues, the hidden storehouse, the financial web connecting Balfra to Khety. Motive, method, paper trail. And then he called Balfra to speak. Balfra walked to the center of the court. Didn't look at Khety, not once. And he confirmed it all. The regency plan, the timeline, which governors Khety had approached, which commanders were going to be reassigned to the frontier. The whole architecture, laid out by the man who'd helped build it. Khety's face went white. Not at the accusation, at Balfra. 15 years. 15 years of loyalty, and the man folded like wet papyrus in front of the entire court. That was the moment Khety understood something he'd been too smart to see. Loyalty built on favors only lasts until someone offers a better deal. He'd assembled his entire conspiracy from men who followed self-interest, and now self-interest was walking out the door. But he didn't crumble. I'll give him that. He stood and fought, called the liver evidence speculative, called Nebamun's confession coerced, called Balfra a traitor trying to save his own skin. And he had allies in that room, men who'd profited under him, men who owed him. For one ugly, tense hour, the court was split, Half believed it. Half didn't want to believe it, which isn't the same thing but functions identically in a crisis. Then Khety did something I didn't expect. He dropped the defense entirely. Just let it go. And he spoke to the court with this cold, stripped-down honesty that silenced the room. He told them Senuseret was dying anyway. Everyone could see the decline. Told them Neferhotep was a child playing with scrolls, while real men managed a country. Told them he had kept Egypt fed, safe, and functioning for 22 years, while the pharaoh aged and the prince hid in the archive. He said, "You're going to hand this country to a boy because a priest didn't like the color of a liver." And for a moment, a bad, shaky moment, it almost worked. A few faces in the crowd wavered, because the ugly truth was that Khety had done the work. For decades. And some of the men in that room were calculating whether Egypt might actually be better off with him running things, murder or not. Neferhotep responded without standing, quietly, evenly, from his seat. "You kept Egypt running. That's true. And you killed the man who trusted you to do it. Both things are true, Khety. That's what makes this ugly." No grand speech, no pointing finger, just a 16-year-old stating two facts in a calm voice and letting the room do the math. It was more devastating than anything theatrical could have been, because it took Khety's best argument and broke it in half. Yes, you were good at your job. You also murdered your king. One doesn't cancel the other. Sit down. The court of judges didn't deliberate long. The sentence? Entombment. Khety would be sealed inside Senuseret's tomb. Not in the burial chamber. That would have been an honor. In the servants' corridor beneath it. The narrow passage where the Shabti figures were placed. Those small, carved statues meant to do menial labor for the pharaoh in the afterlife. Carrying water, grinding grain, answering the god's summons in the dead king's place. The symbolism was announced publicly, and it was surgical. Khety sought to rule in the pharaoh's name. Instead, he would serve in the pharaoh's tomb, not as a man, as a thing, a tool with no name and no will, performing the smallest, most menial work for the master he murdered. Forever. That's when Khety broke. Not at the verdict, at the meaning. For an Egyptian of this period, this wasn't just execution. His name would be chiseled off every monument. His family's tomb would be sealed, unfinished, abandoned. He would have no afterlife as himself. His Ka, his spirit, would exist only as a servant, aware, bound, carrying water jugs through eternity in a dark corridor, while the man he killed rested in gilded cedar above him. For the first time in this entire story, Khety showed real terror. And it wasn't the dying, it was the forever. The day of Senuseret's burial, full ceremony, priests, mourners, the long procession through the necropolis under a white sky. The pharaoh's sarcophagus was placed in its chamber with the correct rites, the correct prayers, everything done properly because that mattered to the people doing it. This was their king. Then, in the lower corridor, they brought Khety in. His mouth had been sealed with wax, ritually, formally, so that he could not speak the spells that would free his soul. He was placed on bare stone, surrounded by the Shabti figures. Small carved servants, the length of a man's hand, arranged in neat rows. And now, among them, a living man, lying down in the dark, breathing. Wennefer spoke the binding words, not a curse in the dramatic sense, a formal religious declaration that Khety's Ka was bound to this place, to serve, to carry, to labor for the pharaoh's comfort in the field of reeds. The exact words they spoke over the little carved servant figures, applied to a living man. The workers began mortaring the entrance shut. Stone by stone, the torchlight narrowed. Khety's eyes were open. You could see them through the gap as the wall went up, catching the last of the light. One of the masons, an old man, been doing this kind of work for 30 years, paused at the final stone, looked back through the shrinking gap, not out of pity, just the simple animal recognition that something terrible was happening to another human being. Then he placed the last stone, and the corridor went dark. Senuseret rested above in gold and cedar. Khety lay below on bare rock, wax on his mouth, the Shabti figures his only company. And whatever happened next in that darkness, in that silence, happened for a very long time. Nebamun was tried and executed. His family, as Neferhotep had promised, was left untouched. The sons kept their posts. The name survived on the family tomb. It was the one piece of mercy in the entire affair, and Neferhotep honored it, which tells you something about the kind of man he was becoming. Balfra was exiled to a mining settlement in the Sinai, alive, but removed from anything that mattered, which for a man like Balfra was its own kind of burial. Neferhotep took the throne. He ruled for 31 years. He wasn't a warrior pharaoh or a great builder. He was an administrator, a listener, a man who thought before he spoke and thought again before he acted. Under his reign, the canals were maintained, the granaries stayed full, the borders held. History mostly forgot him, because competent, quiet kings don't make for dramatic monuments. But the people he governed ate well and slept safe, and that's more than most pharaohs managed. Here's the detail that sits with me. Neferhotep never spoke publicly about Khety again. Not once in 31 years. He didn't tear down the vizier's administrative reforms. Many of them were good policy. He just removed the man and kept the work, which might be the most devastating erasure of all. Not rage, not revenge, just a correction. Like fixing a misattributed line in a ledger and moving on. So, 1894, British excavation team opens the tomb. They find the pharaoh upstairs, largely intact, everything where it should be. And downstairs, in that narrow servants' corridor, bones on bare stone, Shabti figures arranged around them, wax residue on the jaw. Anomalous secondary burial, filed under miscellaneous human remains. No name, no story, just a line in someone else's excavation report. 22 years of running an empire, reduced to a footnote. That's the debt, not the dying, the forgetting. Khety wasn't stupid. I want to be fair about that. He wasn't even entirely wrong about Neferhotep's weaknesses. The boy was untested. The governors would have probed for softness. The concerns were legitimate. But being right and being justified are two different currencies, and only one of them spends in the afterlife. Khety's real sin wasn't ambition. It was the specific arrogance of believing that being useful made him irreplaceable, and that being irreplaceable made him entitled. He forgot the oldest rule there is. The man who holds the door open still isn't the one who owns the house. The debt is collected. The ledger is closed. And somewhere, under the sand, in the dark, a man who wanted to be Pharaoh carries water jugs for eternity. Sleep well. If you're new here, welcome. The Karmic Debt Collector has a lot of debts left to collect, and the ledger only gets darker from here. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if this story hit you the way I think it did, leave a comment telling me which part stuck with you. Was it the old priest holding the liver under the lamp? The mason with the last stone? Neferhotep's one quiet line in the courtroom? I read every single one. Ring the bell. Share this with someone who needs a good story tonight. And I'll see you next time. The ledger is never closed for long.